I had already seen 3 of the victims online before I ever spoke to the man and his daughter. The first was a young mother from one end of the high desert. Her photo on the news looked like it had been taken on some family camping trip, the sun tangled in her hair. The second was a truck driver from another stretch entirely, who used to stop by for coffee when he passed through town. I did not know him well, but I remembered his voice, raspy. Like every word scraped its way out. The third was a retired mechanic from the opposite edge of the desert. A quiet man I had served pies to a handful of times. The articles were short, bare facts and vague warnings. But my dreams filled in the rest. Not the way you would expect. No monsters, no faceless killers, just strange, quiet details. In one, I was standing in a patch of desert at night, the wind tossing sand into my eyes. The young mother lay in the dirt, one shoe missing, her hair stiff with dried blood. I reached down and felt something hard in her hand. A flower. In the morning, when I read her obituary, I told myself my brain had just made that up. Another night, I dreamed of the truck driver's rig sitting abandoned on a frontage road. I opened the cab door and he was there. Eyes open but not seeing. His hands resting on the wheel. Between his fingers was the same kind of flower. Pale, dry, curling inward. I shook myself awake, sure it was just because I had read too much about him. For the mechanic, I dreamed of a dark workshop, tools hanging on the walls. He was slumped in a chair, head tilted to the side, one arm hanging loose. In his palm again, a desert rose. I told myself it was just my mind recycling the same image. Still, the dreams made me worry for my customers. Folks were scared. Nobody wanted to throw birthday parties or retirements or even graduations anymore. If people were not celebrating, they were not ordering cakes. So I dropped my prices, lowest in town. Not because I needed the money. My aunt left me enough to keep the place alive, but it felt like something I could do. Maybe if people had a reason to smile, it would keep the fear from settling in too deep. The cops came in sometimes. I gave them free pastries, told them it was just good community service. Really, I wanted to hear whatever scraps of information they would let slip. One afternoon, while they were nursing their coffee, I asked if they were getting any closer to finding him. One of them said something about those flowers, and then shut his mouth like he had just stepped off a cliff. I leaned in, asked what flowers. "Desert roses," he muttered, eyes fixed on his cup. "Every one of them is found with one in their hand. Every one of them is found with one in their hand." The weird part was, I knew that already. It was not in any article. I had only seen it in dreams. It wasn't in any article. I had only seen it in dreams. I told myself it was a lucky guess, that maybe I had read it somewhere and forgotten. But the thought wouldn't leave me alone. The nights after that were worse. I would wake in the dark and swear I smelled dust in my sheets, a dry, bitter scent that did not belong inside. Once I found a few grains of sand on my bedroom floor, clinging to my socks when I got up for water. I told myself it was from tracking it during the day, but I couldn't remember walking through any that week. A week later, the man and his daughter came in. She looked about 16, keeping her gaze low like she was somewhere else entirely. He was looking for a cake with a specific kind of frosting I did not have. I told him I couldn't do it in time for the date he wanted. The girl flinched, like she thought I might yell. Something in me twisted. I smiled and told him I could make it happen after all. That night, my sleep came heavy and deep. No tossing, no teeth in the dark, just a single, vivid dream. I saw him walking alone on the edge of a dirt service road. Service road. The sky the color of cooling ash. The wind smelled like rain on dust. Someone was behind him, close enough that I could hear their breathing. He turned his head and there was a dull, wet sound. His knees buckled. He fell forward into the dirt, his cheek pressing against the ground. His hand twitched once, twice, and then went still. Between his fingers, a brittle desert rose caught in the moonlight. When I woke, I felt good, rested, clear-headed. I lay in bed scrolling through my feed until I saw the headline. Latest victim identified. It was the father. Same photo I remembered from the shop, his arm around the daughter. I stared at the screen until my thumb went numb, and for some reason, I suddenly remembered something from that day in the bakery. Something I had pushed aside. Before I had stepped away to check the frosting, he had muttered at her. Low, but sharp enough to cut. "You are wasting my money. Could have just bought a boxed cake mix and had your mother make it." Her eyes had stayed fixed on the floor. I do not know why that memory came back then, but it settled into my chest like a stone. I pulled out my order book, found his number, and called. No answer. Just his voicemail greeting. I told him the cake was ready for pickup. When I hung up, I opened the industrial fridge to start on the morning prep. The top shelf caught my eye. 2 of my aunt's dried desert roses sat in their glass jar. Petals curled like little fists. Only 2. I stared at the empty space where the others had been and asked the room, where did the rest go? I had almost missed my bus that day. Part of me wishes I had, but it wouldn't have stopped what happened. Sandy still would have shown up to Grandma Kelly's apartment. She still would have had to go through all her things, and she still would have gotten that stupid necklace. I didn't miss the bus. I somehow managed to reach the door just before the bus driver actually took off, and apparently he was in a good mood because he reopened the doors to let me in without so much as an eye roll. The whole ride into the city was choking. I had put on a podcast to try to drown out my thoughts and stop myself from crying quite so publicly, but it didn't work. My parents died in a car crash when I was just a baby. So, my twin sister, Sandy, and I grew up with our paternal grandparents. Life with them was generally lovely, but we got bullied pretty bad in elementary school. Kids are cruel, and having dead parents fuels their fire enough without adding being raised by lesbian grandparents to the mix. Just old age as far as any professionals could tell, but given she was only in her late 50s, I'm sorry, but I just don't buy it. Either way, the event left me with only Sandy and Grandma Kelly for family. That is, until 2 weeks ago when Grandma Kelly was found dead by her landlord. The coroner says she wasn't in pain. She had an aneurysm and was dead before she even hit the ground. It's not a bad way to go if you ask me. Still, I had just become freshly 19 years old, and the only family I could call my own was Sandy. She was all I had left to live for. Sandy was already there when I showed up at the lobby of Grandma Kelly's building. We were both shaky, and I saw Sandy twitch as she was about to open up for a hug, but she resisted. A silent agreement to remain as stoic as possible for the time being. The landlord handed Sandy a key and motioned us along. He knew that we already knew the way and let us up on our own, I guess for privacy. When we reached the door, we both stopped abruptly, neither one of us daring to move. But we had to eventually. So before I could change my mind, I forced my limp hand to pick at the key, which fell from Sandy's grasp with no resistance, and opened the door. I stepped into the apartment and everything went numb. I could see the living room that was almost empty except for the sparse furniture scattered throughout. Aside from that, I'd completely lost my senses. I couldn't smell the lavender candles she always burned or hear any noise coming from in or out of the apartment. Everything outside the window was a blur. I have no idea how long I'd been standing there, trying and failing to process everything. I did eventually break from my trance, though, and heard a small snuffling sound from behind me. I turned around and saw Sandy piled into a heap on the floor. The sound had been coming from her. She'd been crying. When she looked up, it was clear to me that she'd been crying for some time, and from the looks of the burst blood vessels in her eyes, she'd been crying hard and was just beginning to calm down. I felt something wet streak down my face and realized I'd been crying too. My legs gave way and I collapsed onto the floor beside her, where we sat and cried until we both were reduced to hiccups, gasps, and gags. I felt a hand on my shoulder shaking me violently until I opened my eyes and found myself laying on the floor. The sun outside the window was beginning to set. Sandy informed me that I had fallen asleep, so instead of disturbing me, she took the liberty of hauling all of Grandma Kelly's boxes out of the storage closet. It was at this point that I remembered why we were there in the first place. We had to sort her belongings. We were the only family she had left too, so whatever we didn't want to keep of hers, it was our job to sell or donate it. I got up as she shoved a box towards me and opened one for herself to sort too. One by one, we went through each item: books, clothes, jewelry, and such. We made decisions on who would keep what and tried to get rid of as little things as possible. When I came across a clamshell box, I immediately knew it would be something for Sandy. I turned it over and saw Lauren scratched into the fabric. When I opened it, I found a clock necklace, one of those really old ones you had to wind up every week. It was about the size of a loonie, had a gold color to it, and on a long gold chain that would have the clock hang around your chest when you put it on. I handed it to Sandy, and she appeared to have recognized it. She just stared at it for a moment before gingerly picking it up between her index finger and her thumb. She squeezed it in the palm of her fist and cradled it against her chest as she closed her eyes and made a sound that was somewhere between a sigh and a hum. It took all night to finish going through stuff after that. She seemed unfocused. I never mentioned it, but I repeatedly caught her stopping to just stare at the necklace. sometimes for a single minute, sometimes for up to 10. It was almost 3 in the morning by the time we'd started heading home, and I had to call a taxi because the night bus doesn't go near my building. The next morning, we had a Sunday brunch to go to at the diner near my place. I'm not one for brunches myself. I always thought it was a girlish activity, but it was more time with my sister, so I never complained. I was barely conscious by the time I staggered in and fell into my seat at the table. I was shocked to see Sandy not only seemed alive, but completely rejuvenated. There wasn't even one indication that she had only slept a few hours, or that she was grieving. Needless to say, this brunch was not the most social one on my part. For as hard as I tried, I just couldn't seem to focus on anything, and any time I did manage to absorb a word or two, it was always Sandy rattling on about that necklace. I still can't fathom how she possibly could have had that much to say about it. What did not escape unnoticed was the excessive use of hand sanitizer. Every time one of our friends so much as breathed in her direction, she would compulsively wipe down not only herself, but also the clock with a liquid that might as well have just been straight ethanol. The week only got weirder from there. By Tuesday, she had completely shut herself into her apartment. She allowed visitors at first, but only if they wore gloves and put plastic over their shoes. She's never been a germaphobe in any sense of the word. But I somewhat understood once I saw the glass display that contained the necklace safely behind at least a dozen locks. The whole visit, she barely heard a word I said, constantly cleaning around the box and double, triple, and quadruple checking that the locks were secure. Exactly once, she left me in the box out of her sight so she could grab a new rag, and she spent that whole time calling across the apartment lecturing me about how the clock was hers, as if she thought I was about to steal it. Upon her return, she promptly ushered me out the door with the promises that she would call me the next day at 6 in the evening. On Wednesday, I rolled out of bed, shortly before noon. I grabbed my phone, as I always do first thing in the morning, and saw that I had 40 missed calls from Sandy. I checked most of the voicemails, and most were just incoherent rambling, but a few were her saying that she was calling just as she promised she would and was wondering where I was. She said it was nearly 8 and I should be home from whatever I was doing by now. I checked the time, and sure enough, it was 11:54 a.m. on Wednesday, the morning after my visit with her and hours yet before she was supposed to call me. By that point, I was already fearing for her well-being, but the last voicemail made my blood run frozen. It was mere minutes after the rest of them, as she asked why everyone was ignoring her. She said she hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks, and she was lonely. At that, I shot out of bed and raced to her apartment on foot in nothing but a hoodie. I felt a mixture of confusion and terror. I was confused because she had never had any history with psychosis or anything that resembled this in any way, nor did we have a family history of anything that could have preceded this. I was also terrified of what I might find, but I pushed through. She was my sister, and nothing was going to stop me from getting her the help that she certainly needed. I was too late, though. When I'd finally managed to open a window and wedge myself through, what waited for me was the sight of an old woman, dead, in my sister's bed. The coroner's results came back yesterday, and I've been trying to process it. There are only 2 parts that are important, though. The DNA tests confirm that the old woman was, in fact, my 19-year-old sister. And she died peacefully of old age. Her friend says I should get a dog, to help me be less lonely moving forward. But I have a feeling that is the most irresponsible thing I could do right now. To the average passerby, it wouldn't seem secretive, but it is. South of the town square, there's a huge field that goes out to an overlook of the water. There's an abundance of flowers that riddle the field, flowers of different kinds and colors, looking like it was ripped from Munchkinland in The Wizard of Oz. Not only is it beautiful to look at, but it's a spectacle to listen to. See, our town is blessed with a field of flowers that can sing. The songs they play can depend on the weather or the events of the town. If it's a beautiful, cloudless day, the song is usually light and upbeat. If it's raining, it's still beautiful, but melancholic. Around Christmas time, the flowers play a wealth of jingle bells. St. Patrick's Day is a cacophony of light bagpipes. At night, a delicate lullaby for the whole town. This may sound like it could get annoying and droning, but the music being played is so peaceful and relaxing that everyone accepts it as part of life. Even newcomers to the town realize how soothing the songs are. It's amazing. We only have one rule, though, and we were working on signs that will be dotted around the field so no one forgets. Do not pick the flowers. In big red letters on a black background sign. Underneath that in white letters is our town's preservation society. I myself am a newer member of the society. Our only goal is to tend to the field during the winter, making sure that everything looks okay and the flowers hold up. Otherwise, we leave the field alone and let the orchestral flora continue. Everyone in town knows this rule. Last summer, there was a family who moved in. A freshly built abode a few houses away from my own. I live on the southern side of town, so I live close to the field. I was so happy a new family would experience the beauty the town gives us. I decided to head over and greet them after a day or so, just so they can be settled with no one bothering them. I knocked on the door and waited. To no avail. I tried knocking once more. Again, nothing. I looked over to the side of the door and found a strange-looking doorbell. It had a big button on it, and surrounding the button was a light. I pressed the large button and looked through the surrounding windows of the doorframe. Lights blinked gently in the house, and around the corner came a bigger gentleman and a black-haired woman. They flashed me huge smiles while walking down the hall to the door. They opened it to greet me. "Hello, welcome to the neighborhood," I said and handed them a welcome card. I got a gift certificate to our town's grocery store for them. They accepted it and smiled and bowed their heads, but didn't say anything. I was taken aback a little bit, but then I saw a small boy turn the corner nearest the door to see who was at his new house. I gave him a big smile and said to all three of them, "I'm Mary Ann. If you need anything, I live in that home right there." I turned and pointed toward my house. When I turned back, I saw the two adults staring at me. The woman started to move her hands up and began to sign. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." And then I noticed that the man and the young boy began to sign to each other as well. The whole family was deaf. I don't know much, if any, sign language, but for an assignment in school, I had to learn my name. I signed it to them, and they had big smiles across their faces. The man looked to have a moment of realization and reached for something out of frame of the door. He handed me a pen and a yellow notepad. I took it and wrote a small message. "My name is Mary Ann. I apologize. The only ASL I know is my name. I guess I'll start learning. If you need anything, please let me know. I live 3 houses away. I'm happy you guys are here. They seemed really happy about that. They waved me goodbye and I walked back to my house. When I went back inside and sat on the couch, it hit me. They don't even get to experience the joys of this town. They can't experience the songs. I saw them around town every now and then and waved hello. I learned a few things at this point. A casual, how are you holding up, and good to see you, but I still couldn't figure out a ton. I was learning, though, for them. One day, I noticed that they left their house with things for the beach. It was beautiful outside and the music was lovely. I had some chores I let pile up in my house, so I would have also gone to the beach if it wasn't for that. The family went toward the south of town. There was a path that led to the beach from there. The music was incredible. A slow mass of flutes, steel drums, bongos, and xylophones, all in a conglomerate of wonder. I was washing dishes and getting lost in the song. My hips swayed to the music as I had a big goofy smile on my face. Then the music stopped. I stared at my hands as the water overflowed the bowl I had let slip into the sink. Silence enveloped me, and I could hear my blood run through my body. Each heartbeat of mine got louder and louder. Then there was a roar. A roar that could take down a whole skyscraper. An ancient bellow. A growl of immense pain, a roar that shook the town, a roar I will never forget. I flinched at the noise but never broke my gaze with the half-clean china. A tear rolled down my face. The music came back. Not as pleasant as it was before at first, but returned to its peaceful nature. A few days later, the freshly built house was put up for sale. Neighbors claimed it was vacated. Haven't seen the family since their journey to the beach. The Preservation Society signs were put up all around the field and we're working on more. Everyone in town knows the rule. The rule shall never be broken. Well, that's strange, I thought to myself, looking at the mound of flesh poking up from my rose garden. I don't remember planting you. On hands and knees, I began shoveling ever so gently around the mound. Before I knew it, tiny little ears began to peek out from the grimy soil. Great, I shouted. Just lovely, isn't it? Frantically, but with the precision of a surgeon, I continued scraping the soft dirt off to the side, revealing more and more of the minuscule body that had snuck its way into my precious garden. I nicked him only once in the endeavor, leading to an ear-splitting shriek that added to my already throbbing headache. I reached down and scooped the boy up by the arms and threw him over my shoulder. Oh, for heaven's sake, would you please stop that bloody crying? I pleaded, patting him gently on the back. I could have sworn I ensured this entire garden was childproof, yet here you are. Tell me, young one, how did this come to be? Well, you see, the seeds of life are sure to find their way. The beauty of your rose garden caught the eye of the all-seeing, who, in turn, potted this seed along your astounding flowers and withered rose petals that litter the ground. Litter, I say. How foolish. No, see, these brown and decaying rose petals provide the very sustenance needed for your blossoming buds to bloom, as is life, isn't that correct? I stood there annoyed. Yes, this is quite the predicament indeed. I simply must have a word with the clerk who sold me the child aside. Ah, yes, life, such a beautiful thing it is. Ah, yes, life, such a beautiful thing it is, the boy continued. Now, if I may, I would like to ask you a question. I replied with a disgruntled, Here I dangle before you, grasped in the clutches of your gargantuan hands. My question to you is this. What exactly do you plan to do with me? You must feed me, you know. I am, after all, just an infant. Oh, and clothes. You mustn't forget the clothing. I also couldn't help but notice that beautiful home just beyond this garden. Oh, Mary, here we go again, I sighed, rolling my eyes. That'll be it then? Over the shoulder, the child went again, continuing to ramble the entire time. Is there a spouse in your life? Could you imagine? He laughed. You alone with me? Oh, no, that will not do. They really need to do something about that child aside, I thought to myself, making my way towards the pin. The playpin is beginning to look more like a pig pin. I chuckled. Oh, yes, and toys. Let's not forget the toys, please. And none of the educational gadgets. All right, down you go, buddy, I said, setting him down in the pin. He looked around confused. His 14 brothers and 13 sisters stared at him, full of hunger. I do believe there's been a mistake. No, I drawled out. No mistake. You simply cannot leave me here, he pleaded as his siblings closed in. This is inhuman, please, he shouted with all his might. I looked deep into his desperate eyes, full of anxiety and fear. You see, kid, the seeds of life find a way. You are the seed needed to provide for your hungry brothers and sisters. I explained to that clerk that I simply could not afford another of you, and yet he still sold me that dysfunctional child aside. If that's not divine intervention, I don't know what is. I couldn't help but let out a deranged cackle as those last words escaped my lips, solely on account of how true they were. The all-seeing must have seen how hungry these kids are. And now, here you are, providing sustenance for these beautiful rose petals, and for that, young one, I thank you. His gaze was remarkable. Completely and utterly hopeless. Well, if that's all, I really must be going, I explained as I turned to return to my precious rose garden. The sounds of pleas turned to the sounds of screams, which then morphed into the sounds of bones snapping and flesh tearing. Approaching my garden once more, only one thought remained in mind as the bunches came further and further into view. That's strange. I don't recall planting that one. When I was younger, I was living on the outskirts of the Canadian Cottonwood forest with my mother and father. We had always made an attempt to live off the land, as much as the land would allow us to do so. My father was the man of the family, so he was the one who went out to hunt. My mother and I, on the other hand, handled the foraging. We'd pick mushrooms and berries from nearby bushes, and we even grew some vegetables in our own little vegetable garden. My mother did not like venturing too far into the woods, When we first moved out here, I had been 8 years old, and my sister Elizabeth had been 6. One day, my mother and sister went out into the woods to forage for chanterelles. But a storm had broken out, and my sister had disappeared in between the trees, never to be seen again. When I turned 15, my father decided it was time for a change. I was grown. I needed to learn how to handle a firearm. He took me out hunting one afternoon, despite my mother's pleas that he would not. We were hunting for deer. My father had a lot of guns, but his favorite was the Remington 700, a bolt-action rifle. He had a few of these, and so he gave me one as well. We walked around inside the dense forest for a few hours, seeing not the slightest trace of deer. The pines were stretching all around us, up towards a darkening gray sky. I found it disorienting. Shortly thereafter, it started raining too. My father, who knew the woods like the back of his hand, told me we'd have to turn around. This forest was a dangerous place when it rained. "We haven't caught a deer yet," I said. He said it was no worry. We had plenty of vegetables in the garden, so we would not be going hungry. I was satisfied with this answer, but I also did not want to catch a cold, so I did not protest. Knowing my father, protesting would not have gotten me far anyways. As we were making our way back, I noticed something to my left. About 100 yards into the woods was a large, dark shadow. It was hard to make out, as it was pouring out here, and the sun was starting to set, but there was definitely something. I stopped up, my eyes locked on the thing. A few seconds later, I turned towards my father, intending to tell him that I think I saw a deer, but he was no longer next to me. He had vanished into the gray, foggy woods. I turned towards the deer-like shadow, but it, too, had escaped me. Suddenly, I heard my father call out for me. "Where are you?" I called back to him. "I'm over here." He called again. "Follow my voice," he said. "Follow the sound of my voice." And so I did. We continued like this for what felt like a half an hour, and finally I could see his silhouette through a couple trees. "I'm over here," he said. "I see you. Come over here." For a reason I did not quite understand at the time, I hesitated. Something about his voice was off. Still, I figured it might just be getting a little muffled in the rain, and so I approached. As I got closer to the silhouette, I found that it was not my dad at all. No, in front of me stood a large deer. I got down, being really quiet, hoping it wouldn't notice me. Something seemed very, very wrong with this deer, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. Was my father nearby? Had he noticed it too? I loaded my rifle and pointed it towards the deer's head, but before I could take the shot, the creature started walking towards me. And in a matter of seconds, we were standing face to face. I froze, my hands shaking around the rifle. The deer opened its jaw wide, too wide, and from inside, I heard my father's voice. "Where are you? This forest is a dangerous place when it's raining." I nearly froze, but still, I managed to pull the trigger. The bullet only pierced the neck of the horrid creature in front of me. This clearly angered it, and it pushed against the ground with its front legs so that it was now standing only on its two hind legs. The thing must have been around 7 feet tall then. With its mouth still hanging wide open, unmoving, it continued speaking in my father's muffled, stolen voice. Ethan Barn, 18 years old, gone missing while hunting in Cottonwood Forest, March 27, 1972. It continued. Noah Jackson, 22 years old, gone missing while walking with his girlfriend through Cottonwood Forest, November 8, 1978. It went on. All the while, it was towering above my shaking body. I was trying to grab proper hold of my rifle, but I was completely frozen with fear. Suddenly, it mentioned a familiar name. Little Elizabeth Jones, 6 years old. It said, gone missing while foraging in Cottonwood Forest with her mother, October 21st, 1986. My sister. At this point, the creature was drooling violently. It let out a sound like someone trying to laugh, but not knowing how to. I managed to grab a hold of my rifle, this time delivering a shot piercing straight through the skull of the creature. It fell to the ground in front of me. I got up, slowly. In front of me was a large, dead deer, and nothing more. The rain started to clear a little, and shortly after, I could see our family cottage through the trees. Through the window, I could see my mother and father sitting distressed in the kitchen. We would not be eating deer that night. I would not be eating deer for the next many nights. At the time of writing this, it's been 17 years since it happened. I don't live near the forest anymore. As soon as I turned 18, I moved to the city, which both my parents were not too happy about, but accepted nonetheless. I still see it sometimes. I'll be sitting alone in my apartment one night, and the rain will start pouring down outside. I'll go to my window looking out, and every so often, I'll be able to catch a glimpse of something standing below the burning streetlight. Not quite animal. Not nearly human. Dearest Mia, I hope you found this letter at least a few hours before your 16th birthday festivities begin. Even if you've not, I want you to not panic and read the contents of this letter very carefully. I want you to pack your bags, essentials only. Clothes, food, toiletries, anything else you might need. Then I need you to grab a weapon. A butcher knife, a bat, a beer bottle, anything that can strike hard. There's a loose floorboard towards the right end of your closet. It contains about $500 in loose change held together by a rubber band, hopefully enough to sustain you for a few days. A debit card under the name Irene Alders, some photos, a rope, and small glass vial containing a black bottle. I pray Mary hasn't found it yet. You must keep the vial with you at all times. Now I need you to listen to me very carefully. You must use the rope to sneak out of the house from the window. Put on your best shoes and run. Strike anyone who tries to stop you. Don't hesitate, else you will be consumed by the guilt of not doing so for the rest of your life. Run till you reach a railway station or bus stand and buy tickets to the farthest station possible and go. Destroy your phone. Change your complete identity. Your name, eye color, hair color, everything. The money in the debit card is enough to help you stay afloat for a few months till you find a job. You must have hundreds of questions, but there is no time for explanations, but you must know our family is not at all what it seems. If it's already too late and there's no way you can escape, I need you to drink the liquid in the vial. It'll burn at first and you'll hate me for the rest of your life for doing this to you, for doing this to your porcelain white skin, but you must trust me, love. When I saw this, death is a blessing as compared to what they'll do to you. Dearest Mia, if you're reading this, that means you've escaped. You must have thousands of questions, and this letter is an attempt to answer a few of them. There are dark things in this world we cannot understand, Mia. Things beyond the comprehension of science and logic. Therefore, I want you to believe everything this letter says, even though how made up and unrealistic it sounds. To understand why you must flee, Mia, you must hear the story of our family, which has been buried beneath centuries of silence. A long time ago, there lived a doll maker. He wasn't any ordinary doll maker, but the finest in the entire country. Each of his dolls took months to make, each detail carved by hand, patterns carefully sewn, and every feature polished until the figure seemed alive. Word of the dollmaker's meticulous craftsmanship was popular amongst the nobles and merchants till it reached the ears of the Viscount of Ravenswick. Unlike the other nobles, the Viscount was known to lead a life of solitude as he rarely engaged with society. The Viscount had an uncanny obsession. He was a doll collector. The Viscount had dolls from all over the world, from the fashionable beauties of France to the lacquered treasures from the East. His collection was so vast that it was said to fill an entire wing of the Ravenswick Manor. But none of the dolls in his collection pleased him enough. The Viscount strived for perfection. He wanted a doll with skin as pale and as smooth as porcelain. Skin that lacked blemishes and bore no mark of age and flaw, and eyes that shone with depth not found with painted glass. He wanted a doll that would blur the lines between artistry and existence. He expressed his request to the dollmaker, promising him jewels and wealth, an amount far greater than he had received for any of his works. The dollmaker, blinded by his greed, got to work almost immediately, working day and night, attempting to make the perfect doll for the Viscount. After a span of 6 months, he was finally done with one of his finest works to date. The doll was truly a remarkable piece of work, combining fine craftsmanship and detail. However, when it was presented to the Viscount of Ravenswick, he had one look at it and immediately dismissed a doll as if it was nothing but a trinket from the common market. The skin is smooth and the eyes shine, but it lacks a spirit and is lifeless. This doll is still wood, no matter how finely carved, said the Viscount. The dollmaker, more than dejected and embarrassed, was angry. No one had ever insulted and dismissed his creations like a rag doll till now. He prided upon being the finest dollmaker in the land and was determined to prove himself. Thus, he asked the Viscount for another chance. The Viscount did not want a lifelike doll. He wanted life itself captured in a doll. Dollmaker, if you can pull this off, I assure you more riches than you'll ever see in a lifetime, said the Viscount before leaving. The dollmaker sat outside his house in the garden, smoking a cigar and wondering how he'll manage to pull the task at hand. He saw his 4 children playing in the garden. One of those 4 was his second daughter, Jade. Jade had made a name for herself in the town for her encapsulating beauty. Her porcelain skin, blue doe eyes, plump lips and curves made her the center of attention almost everywhere she went. The doll maker leaned back on his chair and observed his daughter. It was almost like he could see the Viscount's vision. Suddenly, a dark idea struck him, a thought so horrifying to him it electrified his eccentric imagination. Now he did not view his daughter with paternal love, but with a craftsman's eccentric fascination. A shiver ran down his spine as he realized that the Viscount's masterpiece would not be made out of wood after all. The following week, Jade was gone, and in Ravenswick Manor, a new doll glistened with the same blue eyes as hers. Its skin was as smooth as porcelain and eyes bright. It was perfect. Too perfect, one might say. The Viscount was completely mesmerized as he saw the doll and showered the doll maker with riches far beyond his imagination. The doll became the Viscount's most prized possession. He used to spend hours with the doll alone, whispering his deepest secrets in her ears while stroking her hair and running his hands over her porcelain skin. However, the Viscount wasn't alone to such uncanny fascinations. He was part of the Ravenswick Society, where art like this was adored and appreciated. Soon, demands for more dolls started coming up in exchange for immeasurable wealth. However, not any woman could be transformed into a doll. Only women who carried the blood of that very doll maker could be transformed into a porcelain beauty adorned by jewels and silk. Therefore, the doll maker and the Ravenswick Society made a pact. On the eve of her 16th birthday, one daughter would be chosen to become a doll to adorn the galleries of Ravenswick Society in exchange of gold, pearls, and favor. Daughters would be told that this is an honor, a sacred tradition that has been keeping this family afloat for generations. Families would not weep, but celebrated as their daughters screamed and wailed while being dragged to the doll maker's workshop. You might have escaped, Mia, but you're not free and will never be. Ravenswick Society always comes for what is theirs. In case you haven't used it yet, the vial contains obsidian tincture, something that scars the skin with fractures that look like shattered glass. Do not doubt me, Mia. You might not know my name, but I know you. The doll you stare at in Mr. Edmund's gallery, the one you cannot look away from, the one that almost breathes and looks too alive. That is no doll. That is me, your sister. And if you falter, you will stand beside me, trapped forever. The rules seemed simple enough. It was a free nature preserve. Despite living in the area almost my entire life, I'd never actually been here. In high school, it was always open when I couldn't be there, and closed whenever I drove by on weekends. The preserve always gave off a very mysterious vibe, probably because I was never able to go. Until now. Granted, I'm 30 now, so while lazing around my place trying to figure out how to spend a Saturday, I figured I'd go out and shoot. I had photographed in almost every park and nature-centered space around my house except here. A quick search showed that the preserve was actually open today, and at pretty normal hours that teenage me didn't think to look up. Closed on Mondays, open Tuesday to Saturday from 8 to 5. Despite hitting every light on my way here, the drive was short. With my camera bag riding shotgun, I sped down the highway, almost missing the dark brown sign saying Belkin Hollow Nature Preserve, and had to make a sharp turn with my camera bag riding shotgun, I sped on the highway, almost missing the brown sign saying Belkin Hollow Nature Preserve, and had to make a sharp turn to enter. Past the rusted iron gates was a gravel road with a large white sign in red letters that said the following: Rules of the Nature Preserve. Stay on the trails at all times. Please don't park on the lawn. Bikes, ATVs, UTVs, and other such vehicles are not allowed. Please don't litter. Photography that is being done professionally requires a permit. My car wandered down the winding gravel road to an empty parking lot, found a spot, and checked the clock, 4 p.m. I got out and felt my boots crunch the gravel underneath them as I tried to figure out where to even begin. The place felt like a ghost town. The information center was devoid of any life at all, and the more I looked around, the more I began to realize how bare bones the preserve seemed to run. It seemed as though no one worked there. Buildings were locked. There was no sign of any sort of human life. I picked a trail and began to walk, feeling the still sleeping earth crunching beneath my feet. I always liked the in-between parts of the season. Late March going into April was always particularly nice, as it was still cool outside. Everything seems dormant, but there were little signs of spring daffodils starting to sprout, little pieces of green here and there. It was peaceful, and I liked it that way. I came across a weathered sign that through chipped paint read Swamp Trail, and off I went. Minutes turned to hours, and before I knew it, the sun was starting to set. I should get back to my car. I turned around and began walking my way back a bit before realizing I made a left to get here, so I needed to make a right to get back to my car. Right? The nature preserve isn't big, so no matter which trail I take, in theory, I should end up back at the parking lot at some point. The iron gate at the entrance seems pretty old. I should be able to just open the doors and let myself out if I ended up leaving after they closed. It'll be fine. The sun gleamed through the barren trees as it began to set in the distance over the river, the beauty of the preserve quietly presenting itself, and I was ready to capture it all. I'll stick to the trail and enjoy the walk back to my car. But none of this looks right. I know I haven't been here before, but the longer I walked, it felt like the further I was from my car. Trying to use GPS didn't help. No bars. With the sun dipping and the temperatures with it, I needed to get back to my car, and I needed to do it soon. With the sun dipping and the temperatures with it, I needed to get back to my car, and I needed to do it soon. The trail that I had started to follow seemed to go nowhere. The gravel simply stopping, almost in a line if it was possible. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted it. An overgrown, tangled trail that looked as if it hadn't been taken care of in a decade. I guess it's not surprising. There weren't even people working at the preserve when I got there. A trail's a trail, and maybe this one could lead me back to my car sooner than later. I should have stayed off that trail. I shouldn't have even left my house. As I wandered down that trail, it was different. The air was different, warmer, brighter, springier, if that was even possible. The further I followed it, the more it felt like spring. New green growth, flowers blooming on either side, as if they were used as railing to guide people down. Inspiration poured out of my camera. I quickly filled SD card after SD card. Why on earth was this trail ever neglected? After what seemed like a few minutes, a clearing came into view. Green, blooming trees bending and twisting into an arch, with bits of sunlight peeking through like fairy lights, with what seemed to be logs set into rows. It was breathtaking. It was breathtaking. And then I noticed it. The longer I looked, the more that came into view. It was a wedding venue. The logs, they weren't empty. Seats filled with what looked like figures of shadows and light, if that was even possible. It almost looked like there were trees and flowers seated in attendance. What's next? Woodland creatures? Suddenly, the flowers on the ground began to sing in a language that couldn't be described or understood. It was beautiful, ethereal. It was old. It was very old. The bride appeared at the end of the aisle. She was drenched in pure sunlight as she almost floated down, her sleeves bellowing in a sudden slight breeze as her dress glistened like the morning spring dew. She was breathtaking. And in a flash, I saw the picture appear in my mind. I had to capture it. I had to capture it. That was my first mistake. My shutter had been silenced, any tracking lights had been turned off, and it was a good quality full-frame camera. It was quiet, and it was fast. There's no way I should have been heard. But I was. No sooner had my finger left the shutter button, the world seemed to stop turning. Everyone had turned their eyes on me. Faces, if you could call them that, were distorted, aged, and uneven. Eyes glowed, their teeth yellow, ragged and scraggly. I suddenly felt the need to get out of Dodge and leave. The bride looked at me next, her eyes boring holes into my body. The air surrounding me seemed to go from cold to warm to sweltering. The light that had enveloped her dress was now blinding, and despite trying to move my feet, felt as though they had been melted into the dirt. She screamed. Rows of sharp, pointed teeth smiled sinisterly at me while she did it. It was a piercing, deafening scream. I felt the blood running down from my ears as everything became muffled. She raised her arms, casting light over where I stood and the congregation stood. They began to make their way towards me. I tried to run, but I couldn't. Looking down, my boots were covered in thick, green, lush moss that began climbing up the heel, and it looked like it was going to try and capture me. Thankfully, a quick slip of my boots and I was off. I turned and fled. The trail, once warm and blooming, turned dark, cold, and sharp. The once clear path now riddled with logs and roots. Was this forest trying to trip me? My lungs on fire, I tore my way down the path I had just taken moments earlier. The screams intensified, and there was more than one. They were getting closer. I pushed my legs harder, demanding they carry me as quickly as they could out of this place. I didn't try to remember which turns I took. I was more concerned with the creatures that were gaining on me as I tried to escape. And as suddenly as I had gotten lost, I saw it. The clearing where my car was, shining under the moonlight. My SUV waited patiently for me. Fumbling with my keys, I was able to confirm that the car battery was still working and was able to unlock my car. I never heard a sweeter sound, sweet and clear. Sound. I touched my ears, and where blood was once trickled out was nothing. No dried blood, nothing at all. I slowed to a jog and listened. The quiet rush of the highway near the entrance and my own hard breathing, while my heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I made it to my car, quickly hopping in and locking it because I'm not taking any chances. I turned it over and heard the hum of the engine come to life. Looking around, there was nothing. No figures, no light, nothing. I must have looked mad running to my car, if there was anyone else to see me. I decided shakily to check my camera and make sure it was unharmed. They were gone. All of them. Gone. All the shots I had taken of the trail, the blooms, the wedding venue, as if I hadn't taken any pictures at all. My phone began vibrating and popping, message after message coming through. Oh, it was 10 p.m. Normal, hey, when are you coming home messages turning into more concerned messages, turning into missed calls from my fiance, my best friend, my parents. The last text saying that if I didn't respond, he was going to call and put in a missing persons report. I texted him back, told him I was okay, and that I was on my way home. The drive home was as short as the drive there, and to say that my fiance was miffed was an understatement. He wondered where I was, why I didn't text him back. Didn't he know how worried I had made him? And what was I gonna say? There's no way he would have believed it. Not like I had any proof to show anyways. So I told him that I got tired after my hike and decided to nap in my car. What was supposed to be a half hour turned into a few. and I apologized profusely. Not totally approving of the apology, he accepted it and sat back down in his chair and resumed. Not totally approving of the apology, he accepted it and sat back down in his chair and resumed the YouTube video he'd been watching. After peeling off my dirty outdoor clothes and taking a shower, I finally began to feel normal again. As I washed my face in the sink, I noticed something right under my earlobes. A small white symbol on both sides. A sun on one and a moon on the other. It was hot to the touch, as if to serve a reminder of what I had escaped, but healed. If I didn't know any better, I'd say it was almost like a tattoo. I tried to sleep, and I couldn't. I could only see the bride's face. The faces of the creatures in attendance every time I closed my eyes. That was 3 days ago. Today is day 4. At this point, I'm willing to try anything to get some sleep. Tea, melatonin, edibles, even doctor-prescribed Ambien. Nothing. I'm hoping that by writing this out, either someone who has dealt with this will have some advice, or maybe just getting this all down will be enough. But those faces, I still see those faces. And every time I pass that nature preserve, I feel those symbols burning deeper into my skin.